The year is 1695. The Caribbean sun, a brutal sovereign, beat down on the deck of the Sea Serpent, a ship whose fame was as notorious as the captain who commanded it. Captain Elias, Elias the Raven. Thorne was a man forged from salt and sorrow, his eyes holding the depth of countless storms and his face etched with a decade of ruthless life at sea. His reputation was simple and absolute. He took what he wanted and he answered to no one. His men were a motley crew, loyal to him not out of fear, but out of a shared understanding that Elias was a man of his word. They knew his code: no women, no children, no needless bloodshed. A code that often baffled the more barbaric pirates of the era, but one they respected nonetheless. Their current prize was a Spanish merchant ship, its hold overflowing with spices and silk. The raid was swift and merciless, the crew of the merchant vessel surrendering before a single cannonball could find its mark. As Elias walked the main deck, his boots silent on the blood-spattered wood, a sound caught his attention, a faint, desperate sob coming from the captain's quarters. He pushed the door open to find a young woman, no older than 20, huddled in the corner. Her wedding dress, once a pristine white, was now soiled with the grime of the ship and the dust of her broken dreams. Her name was Isabella, and her eyes, filled with a mixture of terror and defiance, met his. She was a nobleman's daughter, on her way to an arranged marriage in Port Royal. The raid had not only taken their cargo, but had also taken her future, her reputation, and her honor. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling but her gaze steady. Take me, instead of this shame. I would rather be a pirate's captive than a ruined bride." Elias was a man of action, not of sentiment. He had seen countless desperate souls, but something in her plea, in the stark, unvarnished look of her despair, resonated with a part of him he had long ago buried. He saw not a weak woman, but a soul as shipwrecked as his own. His first mate, a giant of a man named Silas, scoffed. "A woman on board, Captain. It's bad luck." "Bad luck is a weak man's excuse, Silas," Elias replied, his gaze never leaving Isabella's. "This woman has chosen her fate. She will have shelter here." And so Isabella became a part of the Sea Serpent. The crew, initially wary, soon found that she was not a fragile noble. She was stubborn, intelligent, and possessed a quiet strength. She learned the ship's layout, listened to the sailors' tales, and began to understand the complex, brutal world she had entered. She saw the humanity in the men, the loyalty they held for Elias, and the simple fact that their lives were not so different from those on land. They were just lived on water. Elias, however, remained a mystery. He was distant and stoic, yet he ensured her safety and well-being. He brought her books from raided ships, shared his own meager meals with her when supplies ran low, and in the quiet of the night he would stand at the helm, his silhouette a silent guardian. Isabella began to see past the legend of Elias the Raven, past the brutal reputation, and into the soul of a man burdened by a past he couldn't escape. She started to help, mending torn sails and tending to the wounded after a skirmish. Her presence, once a point of contention, became a source of calm. She learned to read the sky for storms, to feel the rhythm of the waves, and to understand the harsh poetry of the sea. She was no longer a victim. She was a part of the crew, a part of the Sea Serpent. The bond between Elias and Isabella deepened, a silent understanding built on shared solitude. One night, under a sky ablaze with stars, she found him staring at a small, tarnished locket in his hand. "A memory?" she asked softly. Elias's voice was a low growl. "Of a life I lost, a life that made me this man." He told her of his past, not as a pirate, but as a young sailor from a fishing village, in love with a woman named Ilara. Their love was simple and true, but it was shattered by a cruel twist of fate. A corrupt Royal Navy captain seeking to steal a fortune from the local lord framed Elias for a crime he didn't commit. His village was burned, his love, Ilara, was taken, and he was left for dead. He survived, but a part of him had died with the fire. He took to the sea, not for treasure but for vengeance, and became the man known as Elias the Raven, the scourge of the seas. Isabella listened, her heart aching for the young sailor who had lost everything. She saw that his pirate life was not a choice, but a consequence of a profound injustice. Her own past, her ruined wedding, felt small in comparison, yet she knew the sting of a future stolen. "We are not so different," she said, her voice a balm on his wounded soul. "We both lost our lives to the cruelty of others, but unlike you, I found a new one on this ship. You are still searching for yours." Her words struck him with the force of a tidal wave. For the first time in years, the hardened shell of Elias the Raven cracked. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not a fragile noble, but a woman of immense resilience. The way she had faced her own ruin with dignity, the way she had found purpose on his ship, it was a beacon of light in the darkness he had lived in for so long. Their conversation was interrupted by a lookout's shout. A British frigate, the HMS Vengeance, was bearing down on them. Elias's face hardened. He recognized the emblem of the Royal Navy. The frigate was captained by none other than Commander Blackwood, the man who had ruined his life. The battle that ensued was a brutal dance of cannons and muskets. Elias fought with a ferocity born of a decade of simmering rage. He was not just fighting for his ship, but for a memory, for a justice long overdue. As the ships clashed, Isabella refused to hide. She helped tend the wounded, her hands steady and her spirit unyielding. She saw the captain for what he was, a man driven by a singular, consuming mission. But she also saw the fear in his eyes, not of death, but of losing the one thing he had found again, a connection, a sense of humanity she had reawakened in him. During a particularly violent exchange, a splintered mast fell, pinning Elias's leg. The crew, caught in the chaos, struggled to free him. Isabella, without a second thought, grabbed a crowbar and, with a strength she didn't know she possessed, pried the wood off him. She looked at him, her face smudged with soot and blood, and said, "We do this together, Captain. We survive this together." Her act was a turning point. It wasn't just a rescue, it was a promise that he was no longer alone. He looked at her, and for the first time he saw a future that wasn't defined by vengeance, but by a shared horizon. The sea serpent limped away from the skirmish, its sails torn and its hull scarred, but its spirit remained unbroken. Elias's leg throbbed with a dull ache, a constant painful reminder of the battle, but also a silent testament to Isabella's courage. In the quiet days that followed, as the crew worked to patch up the ship, the unspoken tension between Elias and Isabella shifted into something deeper and more profound. Their conversations, once clipped and practical, now meandered into the realm of possibilities. They spoke of the future, not in terms of buried treasure or daring raids, but of a life they could build together. Elias confessed that his quest for vengeance had long since become a hollow pursuit. The years of rage had left him feeling empty, a ghost haunting his own life, and it was Isabella's presence that had finally begun to fill that void. She had brought a human warmth back into his world, a world he had long thought was lost to the cold, dark depths of the sea. One evening, standing at the bow as the setting sun painted the sky in fiery hues, Elias turned to her. "I still want to find him, Blackwood," he said, his voice a low, gravelly confession. "But not for vengeance, not anymore. Now it's for justice. And when that's done, I want a life, a different life, with you, if you would have it." Isabella's heart soared, a feeling so pure and overwhelming it took her breath away. The ruined bride who had begged for shelter had found a home in the unlikeliest of places. in the arms of the man who had been the very symbol of her ruin. Their final confrontation with Blackwood was inevitable, and it came in the treacherous waters off the coast of Tortuga. The sea serpent was outgunned and outmatched by the formidable British frigate. But Elias had a more powerful weapon, his superior knowledge of the local coves and currents. He expertly lured the larger ship into a narrow, winding passage filled with hidden reefs. The ensuing battle was a final, desperate act, a final reckoning that would determine their fate. Elias, with his loyal crew fighting alongside him, finally came face to face with Blackwood. The two men, a pirate and a commander, a victim and his tormentor, fought with a raw fury that had been building for a decade. The clash was a whirlwind of steel and determination. It was quick, brutal, and ultimately Elias won. He stood over Blackwood, his sword at the man's throat, the ghost of his past finally vanquished. The moment was his to seize, his to define. But instead of a final, vengeful blow, Elias made a different choice. He disarmed Blackwood, leaving him to be captured by his own mutinous crew, a humiliation far worse than death for a man of his standing. He had sought vengeance for so long, but in that moment, as he looked into Blackwood's terrified eyes, he realized that a true victory wasn't about another's downfall, but about his own liberation. His freedom was not found in revenge, but in the release from its consuming grip. With his past finally laid to rest, Elias looked out at the sunrise, a new horizon unfolding before him. He was no longer Elias the Raven, the pirate defined by his rage. He was simply Elias, a man with a future. He turned to Isabella, who stood by his side, her hand fitting perfectly in his. They were two broken souls who had found healing in each other, a new purpose forged in the crucible of their shared struggle. Their journey had begun in a moment of shame and despair, but it had led them to a shared promise of a new life. They would sail to a new land, a place where their pasts could be buried and their future could be built together. Their story was not a tale of a pirate's life, but a testament to how even in the darkest storms, a beacon of hope can emerge, leading to a new, shared dawn. And so, as the sun rose over the shimmering Caribbean waters, the sea serpent sailed not for plunder, but for home, carrying a captain who had found his heart and a woman who had found her future. They sailed into the horizon, ready to write the next chapter of their lives together. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more like it, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you don't miss our next adventure. We'll be bringing you more epic tales of love, loss, and high seas adventure very soon.